And Isaiah sees a corrupt nation full of evil, blind evildoers rebelling against God.
Into it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, thank you, Seth, for being here again. Traditional family and fatherlessness in the home. If there is a silver bullet culturally, that's it. I grew up in foster family, kids coming in and out of my house. So much life experience with this, and then going away in the military, having a lot of intimacy with men that have fathers, speaking to them about how that ravaged their life and their community and their families. Something recently that's been on my mind is to really go after the dads and the fathers in the church, to revolutionize our communities and our towns. And somehow in my mind, all those satellites are in the same, orbit. The church should always be leading by example in all pursuits of righteousness and remedying and lighting up the dark. And at least in my community, it's never said out loud. But we all know that masculinity in its most transparent form, it's like something you almost apologize about. And I think that goes all the way back to Eden. The Lord says, you've eaten this fruit, now as a curse, your labor pains, you are going to, it's the same word that they use in Cain.
Yeah.
It's it's a weird adjective, and it's only used in the Bible a couple times, but it means like tear down.
Yeah.
Or like ravage, or like want to be like. Envy. It's a very potent adjective. And wouldn't you know it, all these years later, same thing. You see it ravaging communities. Fatherlessness in some ways is the fault of the man because he's derelict to duty. Fatherlessness is the fault of the community that has no appetite for it. And fatherlessness is the fault of our society because they've put all types of impediments and financial and tax code impediments. And they basically have said, we don't want fathers in the home in every way you can with legislation and tax organizations and all these things. Mm-hmm. So what do you get? Jump ahead 70, 80 years? Everywhere, in every community, the numbers are rising.
And I think you hit it right on the head. Let's just go statistically. Right now, from the mid-1950s, 1952s, when we start seeing the rise of single-parent homes, and majority being single-parent being the mother, we start to see that rise about the early 50s, mid-50s. Mm. At the same time, you can see the statistics of juvenile delinquency, deviant behavior. Statistically, that is parallel and rising at the same time. 52% of all single parent homes are mothers that never married when they had the child.
Yes.
Look, another 18% are ones that are divorced and the father left the homes with the mother being the primary. Just bringing in the widow population, we're already seeing close to 85% of most families right now are single parent mothers. And the funny thing that I say families, they've changed the word of traditional family. The first definition is a makeup of a mother and a father in a household with their children, whether by adoption or conception. And the very next definition is also we want to include all single parents also as considered as a traditional family, or transformation of what even a traditional family meant.
Call it?
Right.
I don't want to rabbit trail, but this is a pattern I've noticed in society where as we just come apart at the seams and none of the ideals are being met, all they do is just redefine the ideals. And in every way in society, when we don't meet the standard, we don't tell society, hey, this isn't meant to tyrannize you. This is meant to build healthy communities. The onus is put on the wrong place. The onus is put on, we're not going to talk about the ideal because so many people aren't meeting it, and that's like emotionally difficult for people.
Yeah.
But the fruits of doing that are in all the stats you've just mentioned. So it's not love. Is it kind to have cities that are ravaged with crime because no one's raising sons, no one's mentoring, no one's walking through the stages with these young men, and so they're just tyrannizing communities and schools? And how is this merciful? This stuff frustrates me. And this kind of mindset is pervasive. Like, it's why we don't talk about it. It's why these conversations are so rare. The family, and specifically the father as the head of the household, is the silver bullet by way of a cultural remedy to almost every problem I can think of. To the financial problems that we face in the home, to the crime, to the lack of like understanding of yourself and the mental health issues. You got fentanyl and drug use because these people are filling parts of their personhood with things that were meant to be developed when you were a child. I grew up with it. I saw these kids come in. They had all these strange survival things they had put together. And it was much like trying to put a puzzle together without the pieces. They were just, the mind, body, and soul had been shattered in the years of innocence. The women that are duct taping these families together, their mental health is suffering because a woman was never meant to do that. She was never meant to play both of those roles and then have to carry all the financial water and then try to somehow put together like a masculine replacement for her son. Who are we kidding not talking about this?
Society right now reminds me of like the ultimate Johnson & Johnson company, like the corner on Band-Aids. And as a society, we hate confrontation so much that instead of actually addressing it, we throw a Band-Aid on it and hope to God that some type of social policy will come out that keeps it like under wraps and we don't have to talk about it anymore.
We've done this for so long that when you hear people talk about it, you cringe. But if you were to just think again at what you've inherited as a paradigm for solving problems, what has that produced? Not talking about it. Like you said, Band-Aids, sweeping it under the rug. Well, it's produced rot, gangrene, black mold everywhere. Well, I mean, to a rational person, is it even debatable?
And it's not. Well, apparently it is because we're not talking about it. Don't get me wrong. There are dads out there that probably, I think we could agree, unfortunately shouldn't be dads.
Yes, I do agree with that. Yeah,
that is just a part of, unfortunately, the fallen world that we live in. I can accept that. But God showed as a father, I love you in this way. As a father, I provide for you. As a father, I won't let you fall. Basically, the manual for dudes on how to be a good dad. Like
that's exactly what it is.
It's like right here. We got
it's the blueprint.
Yeah, from Genesis to Revelations.
Yes.
When you're super angry to when you're like, you gotta live in grace.
Yes.
But I want to meet the rest of society. Okay, you don't want me to talk about God. That's going to be hard for me to do, but you don't want me to do it? That's fine. Let me talk to you about the numbers that you guys provided me.
Yeah.
Like the single mother, you're talking about a overwhelming amount of percentage of change in teen pregnancy, child abuse in the home, mental behavior, demise, deviance, school behavior, school grades, suicide. Everything goes up as soon as the father is removed from the home, which is something significant. As a society, we understand the concept. So then what do we do? To what you said at the beginning, how do we hold the men of our society to be responsible for, one, their actions, and two, how do we let them know that this is how you can be a good father? And it's not something scary.
How do we call them into responsibility? How do we call them back? Like by way of why fathers aren't in the home, that is a very, very complicated thing. You can take it all, Lyndon Johnson and all of this federal manipulation. You can watch, they're delivering all of this like government intervention into the home, which is then providing these families with other options than to be together. Now, many people will make the argument this is like a very, very merciful thing, and you can find many, many, many instances where federal help has materially helped people from the panoramic view, and you just watch society. Think of it as like a weed in the garden. You just see it rip families apart. Logically, I think that did something very negative to the male psychology because they decided, you don't need me in this home. Men think of themselves as providers, protectors. Most men I know have their head on a swivel when their family's around. They're looking at the entrances. They're examining the threats. That goes back as far as time. Well, you start removing some of those things. You start removing the financial need. Well, the very pH balance of the relationship between a man and a woman changes. And there's all kinds of dissatisfactions that spring up. And I've watched that happen my whole life. I've watched men who have no worth in that home. They do have worth, but they don't think they have worth because they're not providing. That masculinity and all things that he has to offer are like downplayed and told to be toxic and told to be unneeded, problematic. And we must make a distinction. Just masculinity in of itself, the presence of masculinity is not bad. And that's the difference that our culture has to relearn. They're correlating abuse and violence. And there's a correlation there that has been so damaging.
They portray those bad traits. I think our wives would also agree, like, no, that's not masculinity. That's just poor parenting, poor judgment, a bad human. That doesn't make you masculine because you can yell and scream. Oftentimes, the person who yells the loudest is more than likely wrong. I don't buy that. Like, oh, we can go to a point to where you're too masculine that it's toxic. I think once you see those levels to where you associate with overly masculine, I have no
character.
idea.
It's just actually probably fear. They are teaching an entire generation to see a man who is not apologizing for his masculinity as threatening. And Jordan Peterson has this great quote. He says, "Don't fear a strong man, fear a weak man." And you and I have been in the military. We've been exposed to a lot of different guys. That is spot on accurate.
I just heard this last week from Jordan Peterson. He kind of said the same thing. Leaders, if you have to yell, if you have to scream to be masculine, then you probably aren't really the real leader, and you're trying to prove that you're the leader.
Nobody's following.
Right. Leaders don't have to say or don't have to scream their answers or their orders.
Right.
It's just a presence that's felt that I understand that you're in charge.
Yes, that's very true. And the weak thing that he mentioned, what I've noticed about that is I've had a lot of interesting careers, which put me in the company of a lot of people who do not ideologically agree with me. And I've been at these like parties, and there will be these guys, and they will just in front of women, like old priests whipping their backs for their sins, the sins of being a man in this like very Lower East Side society. And what's interesting is I know that man. If people only knew the kind of things that man is saying and the kind of things that man is doing, yes, he's verbally vomiting out all of the proper
right things,
proper modern gibberish, but I wouldn't let him babysit my kids. The level of psychological insecurity, the things that man would do to accommodate all the damage that I see in his mind is actually threatening. Whereas just your normal, mentally healthy, confident guy that's just not going to lay down his testosterone on the altar of modern, that dude's going to walk out of the room, probably has found a way to place his aggression and the things that he does feel as a man in a proper place that builds him up rather than tears people down. Like, that guy is not your problem. Your problem is like this burlap bag soy boy. That's the dude that like could present some problems. In my personal experience, I'm talking about from people I've known, Jordan just whittled all that gibberish I just said down into that great line, which is, don't fear a strong man, fear a weak man. That's very true.
That's just a subconscious feeling that I think most humans get. You can feel it about it. Like, you can feel that the weak person, there's something about it. There's a window that you're just not showing me.
There's an offness.
Yeah. And sometimes it's disappointing because sometimes you want to believe the person's telling the truth, that the person is who they say they are, get disappointed on the other side of it.
I learned a lot about men by going to war. When we were stateside, there would be all this boisterous behavior and all this alpha man behavior. At war, I had this unique experience where I was worshiping in the worship tent. And I got to experience a lot of men who were doing business with their souls because the threat of death was upon them, and they were away from their supports, and it was a dry environment, so their vices were taken from them. And I got to see these men like right down to the marrow. It was just an interesting situation.
Yeah.
I think if I wasn't in the worship tent, I might not have seen all that. But what surprised me is the guys that were really boisterous stateside were like a mess in theater.
Yeah.
And the quiet guys that didn't draw a lot of attention to themselves, maybe even to my great shame now, I underestimated stateside. Whatever that grit was inside of them, whether it was a strong upbringing, I don't know what the cocktail was, they shined in those environments. It like distilled everything down to its realness. And I was very thankful to the Lord for giving me that experience, because I felt like it gave me a lot of perspective.
And I think, going back to what we were talking about, what are some of the steps as a society can we like really reintroduce the Christian man? To your point, when you're overseas, you have a moment, an extended moment of meditation on self.
That's a really good point.
And I don't mean the new age version of meditation,
like
but
the ultimate issues before your mind,
right?
Something like that.
One of the things that I find myself doing, so in the morning when I wake up, I know I can turn on that cell phone. I probably have 16 emails. I have 4 text messages. The news is blowing up. If I really wanted to, I could jump on social media and be connected to the world, but I can't. I gotta have to let my brain almost essentially flush out.
Wow, that's really
and kind of reset. I give myself 30 minutes.
This is good.
So I ignore my phone, ignore the world for about 30 minutes. And sometimes that's just me by myself. Sometimes that's like a devotional on my own. Sometimes that's just simply having a bowl of cereal with whatever kid has decided to wake up at 5:30 in the morning. I think where as a society, we don't allow a moment for them to self-meditate, flush out and reason. And we're just constantly spun up in a making irrational decisions, almost like a expected utility theory. Hey, we're just running on probabilities. I'm making these decisions off of the probability of having it. So it's kind of irrational, but it's the most rational decision I can make right now.
Yes, it's like the best of the bad decisions.
Right. And we don't have in a society a moment, stop for a second, reset, realign, refocus, to start talking to the next generation of men and fathers to be like, look, you need to set up your own parameters for a time and place to make time to meditate on your own.
This is very interesting. There's so many spiritual disciplines that solve the problems of the world. I just fall more and more in love with the wisdom in the Bible. But this idea that you get up, give yourself a second, and I fail at this often. My wife is so good at this. First thing you do is open up that book of ancient paths and just let it kind of reset the computer, like almost a clock, this old clock. This idea that the great leaders of old and the many, many men and women who have been wise and changed the world, that so many of them did that. It pushes down pride, which is obviously the big mother lode of sin, and destroys everything in your life. It does what you said, which, you don't just let the floodgates open the second you get up, and your mind's just basically operating at like half bandwidth.
Yeah.
We're going to go back to fathers. I got boys, you got boys.
Yeah.
The other reason I can never be convinced that men are not important to the home is because there is a magnetism that my boys have to me. I had a great father, but a lot of my foster brothers did not have a great father. They were like deserts, and my father was like water to them. They wanted to suck up that thing that they never had, in all those years. It was moving to me, and it's not like my mother wasn't kind and wonderful to them, but those young boys, they wanted to be around my dad, and they wanted that. That was just like in the cards.
And like when you asked me, like, hey, what do we need to do as a society to like start transforming our men into being fathers that are, let's just say present. Really,
it's a low bar, but let's start there.
Yeah, let's just start with
a low bar.
Present. You got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, there's got to be a
101
baseline.
all around.
Like you said, like the foster kids, like they soaked your dad up like water.
Yep.
I don't think that we need to come up with another plan. What's another incentive?
Program.
Right. Let's
How do we get the government to solve our problems?
Let's send out a questionnaire, get some surveys going, figure out what the best.
Let's get the bureaucracy on this
group think, and we'll figure it out. But no, it takes me and you and the rest of society of men that just interject, like be those beacons of, not that I'm like the best dad, but
you're a great dad, dude.
Well, so me.
Yeah, I see you.
You ask my kids, depending on what the day is.
No, your boys are great.
But
they're so lucky. They win the lottery.
Pour it out on those new fathers, on those new men.
Like that's so meaningful, Seth. Like for another man to come up to you and be like, look, and I don't know what you've been told, but if somebody hasn't told you that you just crossed the line of demarcation. Yeah. And this is another problem, that our society doesn't have a rite of passage, it's called in some cultures. Yeah. We don't have this gauntlet, and then you get to the end of the gauntlet, and all the other men are like, now you're part of the Indian tribe, and you're able to go on the buffalo hunts. Like we don't have this. As a result of that, psychologically, you see a lot of young men failure to launch. There's this nebulous time for a young man where he doesn't really know where he fits, and that's very damaging, I think, to a society.
But to sit in an echo chamber of what we hear, I can be independent and I don't need a man, but there is a commitment in this process of parenthood that, just like when you're making bread doesn't work if you don't add the right ingredients. You're still going to go through the process, still put it in the oven, but it's not going to be the same loaf.
Right.
There's ingredients that go together for a reason.
And society has tried very, very desperately, but to no success, to convince themselves that loaf of bread does not need yeast or whatever. I talk to a lot of people that I think are tiring of this, like men are bad, men are cartoons, men are stupid, men are the problem. That is waning a little bit. Nobody wants to change anything. They're just all like, yeah, this is getting really annoying, and obviously this isn't working. Like, I'll give you an example. So I got this friend of mine, just to go into like the political realm for a second. This friend of mine has a really, really good job in a Fortune 500 company. they're turning these companies into like political objects and stuff and making all these people sit through all these seminars. And a lot of them have to do with like how the genders interact with each other.
Oh,
what
yeah.
you're allowed to say, right. So
The Army's there too.
yeah, the Army's there. The military was there when I was there too. But this is the thing he told me, that don't tell a woman that she looks nice today. Don't hold a door. Don't do things that your grandfather would have just thought were like normal things. You're going to get sued. You're going to get called names. Sky's the limit. He's telling me this as we're having a drink and just alone. He goes, what I see on the regular, that it's known in the company that this woman is like, she's like an activist, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say there's a break room or a coffee room. This woman will walk into the room and every single man in the room will walk out. Not even because they necessarily dislike this woman or don't want to talk to this woman, but because they don't want to take the chance with their careers and their lives and their reputations. This woman, in their mind, is just a live wire. Like, there's just no telling. It could be true. It could be untrue. She could have a bad day or their relationship went south. So here's my point. He says this is pervasive in his company. Like, it's a cost ratio analysis to the guy. This isn't worth it. I'm having this coffee somewhere else because the odds of danger go down significantly. All this, public service announcements and seminars and all these things that we do. And that's actually the result. That's the result nobody ever tells you about. That's the result nobody ever speaks about, but that's what's actually happening. So you're not having men and women learning to behave better around each other. I'm not opposed to that. To communicate better, I'm not opposed to that either. Yeah. What you're having is men know, I'm out. Pull the ripcord, I'm out. Now I think you're only exacerbating the problem.
Yeah, we have it posted on social media. Where are all the real men at? Like,
yeah, where are the men? Yeah. Where are the men at?
Well, you chased them out of the room because, and it may not even have been you. Like you said,
it may not have even been you. You might be not even like that. But he just doesn't want to take the chance. You might be. It's a wild card.
We're programming the next generations to be so off of, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Oh, look out. We're reprogramming that society to think a different way. And for what purpose?
It's not resulting in good things.